Hello, this is Angela with Parkrose Permaculture. It is a chilly October afternoon here in Portland, Oregon. I'm sitting at Mount Tabor Park because my kids really wanted to come and get one more day at the playground before we have a stretch of rain this week. So there may be some background noise in this video because it's really busy here. But I wanted to take a few minutes and work while I have some downtime on going through the concept of zones in permaculture, particularly focusing on zones 4 and 5. So hang tight with me. This is when I had time to film and where I had time to film, so we're going to make the best of it. Let's dive into permaculture zones. What's up, George?
I was gonna say.
You forgot what you were going to say? One of the tools that we use to help understand the landscape around us is the concept of zones of use. Now, in permaculture, there are 6 zones. There are 5 zones outside the house, but the home itself is zone 0. So we have, starting at the middle, it's almost like these concentric circles that radiate out from the nucleus of our home. So our home is zone 0. And then we have zones 1 through 5 stepping away from that zone 0. So zone 1 is a place that you visit frequently several times a day. So it might be your herb garden, your strawberry patch. It might be your swing set for your children right out the back door. It might be your front porch. It might be any area of your garden or your property that you visit many times a day frequently. It has a high level of use. Zone 2 are areas like your chicken coop or maybe where you keep your goats. There are things like your annual veggie patch. There are places that you visit probably on a daily basis, but they don't get as heavy a use. So you can see as we step out into the greater number zones that we are decreasing the frequency of utilization of that zone. So we're having less and less frequent interaction, and we are having more and more self-sufficiency. We tend to put things in zone 1 and 2 that need a lot more maintenance and a lot more human interaction to keep them functioning well. And as we move into zone 3, these are places that we visit a little bit less frequently. I know for me, I keep my bees in my zone 3. I keep some of my perennial food crops in zone 3. I don't need to visit them every day, maybe not even every week, but they still rely on a connection to me in order to fully function. Now, zone 4 and 5 are 2 areas that I think are often not discussed as much as they should be, particularly if we're looking at urban and suburban permaculture. Because most of us, if we have a small plot, our yards kind of end at zone 3. Especially if we have a small yard where we want to utilize every inch of our space. Some of us, hi George, some of us may not have a zone 4 or 5 on our property. And I've spoken about this in the past, about how if we live in a more tight-knit community, if we live in a more compact area of human habitation, that we can start to think about zones 4 and 5 as places off our individual property, where zones 4 and 5 are community spaces. They're either owned by the collective community as a whole, or they are entirely wild spaces. So zone 4 is an area like a woodland or an area that you visit less often. You visit it very rarely. You might visit it to harvest lumber once every 10 or 20 years out of it. You might go once a year to perhaps go foraging for mushrooms, but you visit it very infrequently, and it has a very low level of management. Zone 4 might look like an area that only gets visited very, very rarely, perhaps initially to amend the soil and plant it, and then very infrequently to harvest yields out of it. Or to come in and perhaps thin an area to let in more light, something like that. But you really interact very, very infrequently, and you let nature kind of do its own thing. Again, Zone 4, we have a really decreased level of need for human interaction to keep that part of the system functioning well. So Zone 5 is pure wilderness that you either never visit or you don't have any hand in amending or altering it in any way. And so that is an area that you may visit for perhaps a stroll now and again. You may go out to enjoy the wildness of that area, but you don't manage it in any way, shape, or form, or perhaps you don't visit it ever at all. You have no hand in it at all. You have no human inclusion in that space whatsoever. Again, I think it's really important that when we're talking about Zone 4 and 5, we talk about how vital those are, not only for us as individuals and us as communities, but also to the ecosystem and to wildlife. Zone 4 areas can be places that either we own, a woodlot that we own, or a grassland that we own that we interact with very infrequently, or they could be somewhere like where we happen to visit this weekend, the Tillamook State Forest. Areas of the forest are harvested for their timber. They are managed, but not heavily, and they are mostly wild spaces. There are hiking paths through them. They are open to the public at certain times of the year, but it definitely is a Zone 4. It feels the hand of human interaction, of human influence, of human design, but it is mostly a wild space. There are no livestock there. There are no humans living in those spaces, but they are mostly turned over to wilderness. And I think when we look at the scale of permaculture, not everybody can have 100 or 200 acres or even 10 acres. Not everybody has the luxury of having a Zone 4 or 5 on your own landscape. I've talked in the past about how on my quarter acre I have a few small areas that I consider Zone 4 for me because I visit them very infrequently and I manage them very little. But they are very small swaths, like perhaps 6 foot by 20 foot areas of my garden. I have kind of micro zones because I only have a quarter acre. And maybe you can think of your property that way, but maybe you also want to think about having your Zone 4 and 5 be places that are community owned, places that are supported by our tax dollars and are managed by folks that are public servants or are not managed at all. So don't feel the pressure to have to find a space for a Zone 4 or 5 on your own property. If you have a large enough area, I really want to encourage you to set aside a significant portion for a Zone 5 for pure wilderness, for nature to decide on her own what she wants to do with the landscape. I know we have friends who live on the Central Oregon coast that have done that with a substantial part of their farmland because it is an elk migration route. And so they do absolutely nothing with large swaths, but let nature decide for herself and let the wildlife that wants to wander in and off the property do that at will. So it can look really different. So I just want to encourage you, if you're thinking about what Zone 4 and 5 look like, think about the scope and design of your individual land that you own. Think about whether you have space for a Zone 4 or a 5, but think about still embracing the concept of a Zone 4 or 5 by utilizing those kinds of spaces and supporting those kinds of public spaces in the greater community that are a lightly managed, low interaction wild space or a completely wild space. So thanks for watching today. I hope you enjoy some of the footage from our trip to this Tillamook State Forest this weekend. If you have a chance to go, it's really, really beautiful. Some of the trails are more accessible to families with small kids than others, so be sure you look at the skill level on the different hikes that are there. But, you know, it's like 400,000 acres, so there's a huge amount of wildness and semi-wildness there to explore and enjoy and support as a public resource. I'll be back later. If you are interested in supporting this channel, please check out the ways you can do that down in the description. Thanks.